What would you say if I told you that for the ancient Romans, watching someone die wasn't tragedy? It was Tuesday's entertainment. Imagine walking into a stadium that could hold 50,000 people, and instead of cheering for a soccer match or a rock concert, the crowd is screaming for blood, for gladiators, for chariots, for death itself. Rome wasn't just the empire of roads, aqueducts, and legions. It was also the empire of spectacle. And those spectacles tell us as much about Roman society as their armies or emperors ever could. When we picture Rome, we usually imagine soldiers conquering lands, senators debating in marble halls, or emperors crowned in glory. But if you were an ordinary Roman, your daily life was probably dominated by something else entirely: entertainment. Games, races, fights, executions. These weren't just distractions, they were woven into the very fabric of Roman identity. So here's the central question we'll explore today. Why did Rome make death itself a form of public entertainment? In this journey, we'll step into the Colosseum and hear the clash of steel. We'll race through the dust and thunder of the Circus Maximus. We'll witness wild beasts dragged from Africa to die for Roman amusement, and we'll uncover the deeper meaning behind these spectacles. Why emperors funded them, why citizens adored them, and what they reveal about the Roman soul. By the end, you'll see that Rome's entertainment wasn't just about games. It was about power, identity, and control. And it's one of the reasons Rome lasted for centuries. When we think of Rome, we often imagine marble temples, legions on the march, or senators wrapped in togas. But perhaps nothing captures the soul of the Roman Empire more vividly than its grand spectacles. Entertainment in Rome was not just about enjoyment, it was about demonstrating power. The Colosseum, that mighty stone arena rising over the city, was more than a theater of blood. It was a stage on which the emperors displayed their control over life, death, and the people themselves. The sheer scale of Roman entertainment was staggering. Tens of thousands of citizens poured into these massive structures, their roars shaking the stone walls, their eyes fixed on the games below. And who paid for these games? The emperors and wealthy elites, who used them as a tool to curry favor with the masses. Every spectacle was a reminder that Rome was unmatched, that Rome could take captives from the farthest reaches of the known world, turn them into gladiators, and force them to fight to the death for the amusement of the crowd. It was also a reminder that Rome had the wealth to import exotic animals from Africa, from lions and elephants to crocodiles and even giraffes, all slaughtered in public view. This was theater with teeth. To sit in the Colosseum or the Circus Maximus was to witness the power of Rome incarnate. Spectacle became a form of soft control. When the people were fed and entertained, they were less likely to rebel. Juvenal, the Roman satirist, famously summed it up as bread and circuses, a cynical but accurate observation. In many ways, the spectacles were a carefully engineered pressure valve. Life in Rome could be harsh poverty, disease, cramped housing. But when the games began, all eyes turned toward the arena. All complaints were drowned in the roar of the crowd, and for a time, the emperor appeared as the generous provider of both sustenance and spectacle. The gladiator stands as one of the most enduring symbols of Rome's obsession with blood and glory. Yet their reality was far more complex than the romanticized image we often see in films. Gladiators were, in many cases, slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals. They were branded with the mark of their status, trained in special schools known as lodi, and drilled like soldiers, but their battlefield was the arena. Still, despite their lowly origins, gladiators occupied a strange and paradoxical place in Roman society. They were despised for being entertainers of blood, yet admired for their courage and skill. Crowds chanted their names, women swooned over their muscular bodies, and poets compared them to heroes of old. A successful gladiator could achieve a fame rivaling that of modern athletes, with murals painted in their honor, cups and lamps adorned with their likeness, and fans who carved graffiti proclaiming their admiration. The life of a gladiator, however, was always at the mercy of chance and the whims of the crowd. Victories could earn them gifts, money, even freedom in rare cases, but defeat could mean death. The emperor or the editor of the games might raise a thumb to spare them, or lower it to condemn them. This public theater of mercy and cruelty displayed the power of Rome to decide fates with the flick of a hand. Gladiators were also symbols of discipline and endurance. Their training was rigorous, their diet carefully managed to maximize strength, their bodies conditioned for combat, and yet they were ultimately expendable. To Rome, they were both human and less than human. Tools of entertainment, sacrificial figures in a ritualized dance of violence. The gladiator embodied the Roman worldview's courage, discipline, the acceptance of death, and the relentless pursuit of victory at all costs. That is why, centuries later, we still remember them. They were not simply fighters, they were living symbols of the paradox of Rome itself, an empire of both grandeur and brutality. If gladiators embodied the brutal beauty of combat, chariot racing embodied speed, passion, and chaos on a grand scale. At the Circus Maximus, the largest stadium in Rome, crowds of over 150,000 people gathered to watch thundering hooves and roaring wheels. The races were far more than sport. They were the heartbeat of Roman popular culture. The racers, many of whom were slaves or freedmen, commanded the devotion of the masses. They drove for one of four great factions: the blues, the greens, the reds, and the whites. These were not just racing teams, they were political, social, and even religious communities. Fans of the blues and greens especially developed fanatical loyalty, dressing in their colors, chanting their praises, and sometimes even rioting in their name. The danger of chariot racing was immense. A single crash could smash a driver into pieces, dragging him beneath his horses, his body mangled before the screaming crowd. Yet this was precisely what fueled the spectacle. The higher the danger, the louder the cheers. The drivers themselves could become wildly popular, achieving fame and wealth, sometimes surpassing senators and generals in celebrity. One of the most famous, Gaius Appuleius Diocles, reportedly earned a fortune that made him one of the richest athletes in history. But chariot racing was more than entertainment. It was a mirror of Rome's political climate. Emperors were judged by their willingness to sponsor races. Some used the circus to curry favor with the people, others feared its restless crowds. The factions could even serve as focal points for unrest, their riots challenging the authority of the state. The chariot race was a microcosm of Roman society itself, order and chaos, loyalty and rivalry, life and death played out in a single afternoon. It was theater not of words but of speed, of dust clouds rising into the Roman sky, of horses driven to their limits while the people roared their allegiance. For the average Roman, the Circus Maximus was more than a stadium. It was a place where identity, passion, and politics collided in the pounding of hooves and the clash of wheels. The Roman appetite for entertainment extended far beyond gladiatorial duels and chariot races. At its core, Roman spectacle was an embrace of death as performance. The Colosseum was not only a gladiator's arena, it was also a stage for wild beast hunts, public executions, and elaborate recreations of famous battles. Exotic animals were paraded into the arena to fight each other, or to be slain by hunters in displays of Rome's mastery over nature. Lions, tigers, rhinoceroses, elephants, creatures that ordinary Romans could scarcely imagine, were killed before their eyes, demonstrating that not even the wildest beasts could withstand the might of the empire. Public executions were another grim form of entertainment. Criminals might be thrown to the beasts, burned alive, or forced to reenact mythological tales where their death completed the drama. The Romans had a word for this: damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. It was punishment, spectacle, and ritual combined into one horrifying display. There were even elaborate naval battles staged in flooded arenas, where condemned men fought and drowned as part of a day's amusement. Death was not hidden in Roman culture. It was embraced, normalized, and ritualized. Crowds cheered at the spilling of blood, at the groans of the defeated, at the collapse of man or beast. Children watched beside their parents, and the sight of death became a shared cultural experience. To modern eyes, this seems barbaric, but to Romans, it was a demonstration of power and order. The arena was where chaos, criminals, rebels, dangerous animals, was brought under control and destroyed in front of the people. It was a living message: Rome is supreme, Rome brings order, and Rome has the right to decide who lives and who dies. By turning blood into entertainment, the Romans did more than entertain. They reaffirmed their vision of the world. It was a society where violence was not hidden in shadows, but placed on center stage for all to witness. At its heart, Roman entertainment reveals more about the empire than almost any monument or text. The games were not frivolous distractions. They were reflections of Rome's worldview, woven into the very fabric of its identity. To the Romans, life was a struggle, a contest, a fight for dominance. The gladiator, facing death with courage, embodied the Roman virtue of virtus, manly strength and bravery. The charioteer, risking his life for glory, reflected the passion and competitiveness that drove Roman ambition. Even the blood spilled in the arena served a purpose, reinforcing Rome's belief in discipline, domination, and control. The phrase, bread and circuses, captures the political function of entertainment, but the meaning went deeper than distraction. These spectacles reinforced the hierarchy of Roman society. The emperor, seated above the crowd, reminded all that he held supreme power. The crowd, united in their cheers and passions, felt part of something greater than themselves. Part of Rome's eternal greatness. Entertainment blurred the line between politics, religion, and pleasure. The games often began with rituals, sacrifices, and ceremonies, tying them to Rome's gods and destiny. The Colosseum itself was dedicated to the gods and to the glory of the emperors. Every death in the arena, every lap in the circus, every row of the crowd was not merely an escape from daily life, but a reinforcement of Rome's world order. To study Roman entertainment is to glimpse the Roman soul. It was a world that did not shy from violence but celebrated it, that turned suffering into spectacle, and that used pleasure as a tool of power. Rome's entertainment was not simply about distraction. It was about identity. It showed Romans who they were, what they valued, and why they believed their empire was destined to rule the world. So what does all of this mean? Rome's entertainment was never just about fun. It was about identity. It was about control. The games united people across class lines, reinforced the power of the emperor, and reminded everyone of Rome's dominance. Over men, over beasts, over life and death itself. Gladiators taught Romans the value of courage and discipline. Even when it came from slaves, chariots ignited passions that could rival loyalty to the state. And blood spilled in the Colosseum reminded all that Rome was supreme, and that death could be beautiful if it served the glory of the empire. Rome conquered with its armies, but it ruled with bread and circuses, and in those circuses, we glimpse not just entertainment, but the very heart of Rome. If you enjoyed this journey into Rome's darker side, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Empire Remembered, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story from the ancient world. And tell me in the comments if you had a ticket to Rome's greatest spectacles. Would you choose the gladiators the chariots, or the beasts of the arena.